What's going on? This is Zach Adelstein here at DFS Army, and today we're going to be going over the Week 11 and college football main slate for Draftkings and some plays on FanDuel as well. I'm here with Aaron Friedman, the other half basically of the college football duo here at DFS Army, and it's going to be a fun week. It's been a fun season so far. Got a few weeks left, and excited to see what's to come. How are you doing, Aaron? How's your week going?
Good. Last week was insane with the weather and some of the injuries. So yeah, definitely just like in most sports, it's probably like these November ones, it's time to like start scaling back or like have fun with it, but we're definitely not immune to the same thing happening this week.
No, for sure, for sure. I think you got to kind of pick your spots, see what teams, just like sports betting, got to see what teams have something to play for, what teams want to save their attrition, save their health for bigger games next week, and then identify the spots where they are important games and the teams might be playing for a little bit more that don't normally get the love and kind of hit those spots. But yeah, I definitely think bankroll management is definitely in play this week. I think next week will be kind of more of important. I mean, every week's important for some of these big teams, but there's a lot of big matchups next week. And then rivalry week is crazy in its own ways. Thanksgiving week with all the Black Friday slates and the Saturday slates and just so many rivalries and so many big games to finish out the year, which is always fun. But yeah, let's jump right in here. We're going to go game by game like we do every week. Single out our picks, kind of go over the game, and go from there. LSU's going to Arkansas this week. This is a really interesting game. LSU's favored by 3.5 here with a 62-point total. The game has kind of bounced back and forth between 3 and 4 all week. There is a ton of money on LSU here. A lot of tickets on LSU. So yeah, let's get into it. LSU beat Alabama last week. Big game for them. Arkansas has been, struggling. Lost to Liberty last week, so two teams going in opposite directions. We have Jalen Daniels here, has had 3 giant games in a row. You go to his game log. He's got over 50 against Florida and Ole Miss, and then he had the 32 points against Alabama. Just really going off, really using his legs. It's where he's really getting all of his value. 7 rushing touchdowns over those last 3 games. And Arkansas has an absolutely awful defense. There's not many ways around that. So I do think this is a spot he can hit as well. The quarterback, I think KJ Jefferson's interesting here. He is banged up. I don't care what his tag says. He is banged up here. There has been rumors that he's going to be out. He just doesn't look the same. He's not he's throwing interceptions. He's fumbling. Had 3 turnovers against Liberty last week. He just looks hurt. But I do think he's in play here. He's, there's not a ton of quarterback value on this slate. There are a few plays at the bottom that I like, but not a ton in the middle here. And Jefferson, I do think is in play here. Somehow he is healthier than we think he is, and he's a decent play. Going over to running back. We rode Rocket Sanders all year. He's been doing well, but he is now the only healthy back on this team, and everyone knows it. And he's just starting to slow down. I think he's starting to get too much wear on his tires. It's, just looking at his, we had a big game, decent game against Auburn, didn't have a touchdown, got, 60 yards against Liberty. LSU has a pretty good run defense. So he's a guy at this price. I'm kind of leaning towards GPP only. There's some other plays in this price range that I really like. And then if you want a value play for LSU, Josh Williams is a decent value running back. That being said, I think their main running back right now is Daniels. He's getting the most carries, so kind of get a 2-for-1 there. Then going over to wide receiver, not a ton of places I really love on either of these teams for wide receiver. I will have Butte in my player pool every week probably just because I know his upside. I saw it last year. He's way too cheap. He can still go off for 40 points any week. I don't care what his log says. But, I mean, even that's a 5 to 10% play in 150 lineups. It's not a ton. So, yeah, that's about where I'm at here. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, mostly some Jaden Daniels. I'm a little worried if Jefferson's out, if the game just gets pretty gross from a fantasy perspective, but that's my biggest worry. And then Mason Taylor at receiver for 3,500. I think he's worth being in the cheap receiver pool.
Yeah, I don't mind that. Getting some red zone looks. Don't mind it at all. There's not a ton of this slate's interesting. There's not a ton of value on DraftKings, so kind of gotta play with it a little bit and get what you can where you can.
Yeah.
Let's see. Going over to Mizzou at Tennessee. This is another pretty interesting game for me. Total here's at 56.5. Tennessee's favored by 20.5. You gotta wonder, is this a letdown spot or bounce back spot? I have to think that Tennessee is still fired up. I think if they went out, things will fall in their favor and they're still in the playoff race. So I do think this is a spot to hit them. I don't love the total here with the spread, though. I would think it'd be 4 or 5 points higher. That being said, Hendon Hooker, say it again, he's always in play. 8,300, had a really rough week last week. Mizzou is not Georgia. Have a better defense than they have in the past, but it's still not Georgia. So he is in play for me. Mizzou's running game or running defense has not been all that great. So I'm okay going with a little bit of Jabari Small. And even I think Wright could get a few more carries than he has. Had 21 last week. He's going to get a ton of volume here at 4,400. I do think he is definitely a GPP play. Going over to wide receiver, I really, there's not a ton of wide receivers I love on this slate. And I think the 3 wide receivers are in play for Tennessee. Tillman's probably my favorite. He's got the most talent out of him. He's still, every week I think he's going to get a little bit better than he did the week before. Last week it was Hyatt had 8 targets, I believe. Tillman had 7, and McCoy had 11. So McCoy's still getting the most targets, but he's kind of becoming an underneath option for them with Hyatt and Tillman stretching the field. So yeah, at this price, I think Tillman's the best. Kind of, I don't mind Tillman in cash or Hyatt. Just kind of feels a little bit gross after what they did last week, but you have to remember their upside, especially Hyatt and what he's been doing lately. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at here. There's not a ton I love for Mizzou. Lovett's getting decent volume. Even Schrader's getting a little bit of work, and Tennessee does not have the best defense, but I just don't love the total, the ITT for Mizzou here. What about you, Aaron? Anything you see here?
Yeah, I like Hooker a little bit better than Daniels at the same price point. I think Tennessee needs to keep showing how good its offense is. So I like him a lot. And yeah, I agree on Tillman and Hyatt here. Probably not looking at McCoy with him being priced so close. And then I also agree. I like small, or not small, right. And then I want some small news too.
Yeah, see
just
how he's
to make
doing.
Sure.
Yeah, make sure small. Yeah, he said he's ready to go. I know earlier today I read and they said he's ready to go, but just keeping an eye on it still. Yeah, I mean, I don't want much Mizzou. McCoy to me is more of a pivot. I do think there's going to be some ownership with Hyatt and Tillman here. And McCoy, we saw him go off in one game, but that's about all he's done this year. What's that big game against Florida? Going over to Oklahoma at West Virginia. Oklahoma's favored here by 8, and the total is 68. It's an interesting game for me. Teams to struggle against West Virginia, but they seem to struggle on defense more than they do on offense, it seems, this year. Teams have been putting up a ton of points here. They just have had a little bit of a struggle stopping West Virginia's offense. Dylan Gabriel's quietly, putting together some good games. Struggled against Iowa State, but had a big game against Baylor, big game against Kansas. I don't hate this matchup. West Virginia is giving up a ton of points to opposing quarterbacks. We saw what Baylor's done against some other spots. Going over to running back, Eric Gray's been good lately. I don't want to love what he's been doing, but he's been doing very good, and he's getting volume. He has over 20 carries in the last 3 games, 100 yards in each of those games, has five touchdowns in those games, and he's also getting work in the passing game. So, I mean, you got to look at him. I don't love his price, but this is not a good run defense. And if he's going to be the main guy and they're going to make him a bell cow, then I think he is in play here. Also, here we need to watch Mathis. Mathis out now. I believe he has been reported out this week, or he's doubtful for this week. I know his tax is out. I believe he's doubtful for this week, and Donaldson out. I think Johnson could get a ton of work here. Last week, Oklahoma gave up almost 200 yards rushing, I believe, and I think Johnson could easily get 15 carries and really go off. GPP only, just with his floor, but this is a nice spot. And then going over to wide receiver, I don't really like any of these Oklahoma receivers ever. They don't do a ton for me. Sam James has been the hot guy for West Virginia lately, and then Prather I always like because him and Ford Wheaton are very similar to me, and you just get the huge discount with Prather. But I do want a decent amount of Prather and Sam James here with this high total. That it feels like a gross game because of kind of the pieces in it, but I do think this is a shootout that someone could stack and win a GPP off of on this slate. It's gross as it sounds. What are you thinking here, Aaron?
Yeah, I actually really like this game. I've been looking for a Gabriel spot like all season long, and this might be it.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited about Gabriel for tomorrow's slate. And then the stacking options are pretty interesting. Let's see. So we have Gray who can be stacked with because he's being used in the passing game. You can run it back with Johnson, as we just talked about. Then at receiver, there's guys at different price points. Mims is like the ultimate GPP guy because you never know what you're gonna get. Or you can go down to somebody like Willis, who's a little safer. But yeah, I don't know. That might be more of a FanDuel play.
But just with a touch upside.
And then you can run it back with a few the James and Prather range I like a lot.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, Mims has big upside and he has talent. They've priced him like he's been getting 22 to 25 points a week when he has, many weeks under 15 DraftKings points, which I hate. I wish they'd price him appropriately. Yeah, I do think he has some upside here for sure. Moving on to Virginia Tech at Duke. Duke is favored by 9.5 here with a 49.5 point total. Not a ton I like in this game, honestly. I do think Leonard is a really nice play, but I hate that he's almost 8K now.
Yeah.
Like he's had the last 3 games, nice floor, nice ceiling. I think it's another place he can have, a decent game. But with that total, it kind of scares me off of him a bit. But again, I mean, you look at the numbers, he's getting rushing touchdowns. He's being efficient with the ball. He's not throwing it a ton. He's not having to. I wish they had a solid running back and not a committee. Because I do think this was a place to attack that. But I'm fine with, just going with Leonard. Outside of that, there's not a ton I really like here. Like I said, he's not throwing it a ton, so not much I want to do there. I don't really want to go to Keyshawn King at this price. If he was down at like 5K maybe. But trying to pay up to 6,300, it's not worth it to me. And then a wide receiver, neither. Maybe Caleb Smith. He gets some targets. He gets some volume. But he doesn't always do a ton with it. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Leonard's the only real play I want here. Anything you like?
Yeah, I completely agree on Leonard. He's too tough to play here with him being so close to like Hooker and Gabriel and even Daniels. I like better than Leonard for just the 600 more. Grant Wells is pretty interesting just because Duke's defense is really bad, even though they have a Elko, the new head coach, was a longtime defensive coordinator. And last week we saw Moorhead, the freshman for Boston College. I think he must have broke the slate last Friday.
Yeah.
Because he had like 2 or 3 touchdowns. So people are gonna overlook Wells, and he's a cheap stack play with Caleb Smith. So he's interesting. He's like an off the radar kind of guy I'd look at.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all for a cheaper stack. Going over to Purdue at Illinois. Illinois is favored by 6.5 here with a 44.5 point total. There's a little bit here to like, I guess. O'Connell, I always want to play O'Connell. We know he has the upside. He just hasn't had it this year. He's had a few big games. Nebraska, which everybody kind of had big games against Nebraska this year. Syracuse, decent game. But yeah, just he's kind of a mad GPP play. And Illinois has a very good pass defense. Running back, Chase Brown's always one of the top plays. I don't care what's going on, who he's playing. If you're getting 31, 41, 32, 33 carries in the last few weeks, give it all to me. That being said, very interesting stat to me. He has 1 rushing touchdown in those 4 games where he has, 130 carries, 135 carries. And he does have 2 receiving touchdowns, so that does help his bottom line. That's something, if he can have some positive touchdown regression, he can really go off. Going over to wide receiver, a few plays here. I do think Charlie Jones always in play. This is way too expensive for him. He's a GPP only play for me. There's other guys that are right there that I like a lot better for the price that we'll be going over. But he's there. And then Isaiah Williams. Isaiah Williams, week to week, is getting a ton of volume. He also has 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, more than Brown has in the last 2 weeks. So they're getting him looks in the red zone, which I really like. And if you're going to get back-to-back 9-catch games with red zone targets, sign me up for 6K. That's, even with Tommy DeVito throwing it to you. So, yeah, Isaiah Williams is someone that I might try to get a decent chunk of here that I think might go a little bit under-owned on this.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, so I'll be at this game, so I'm really interested to see it in person. But yeah, there's a lot for the total of I think it's around 45. There's a lot of fantasy goodness for a game in that total, which is pretty rare. Yeah, O'Connell has some upside. He's basically been around this price all season, so you don't really need much. I didn't notice how good of a season DeVito's having. He has a 14-2 TD to INT rate. I like I would probably go Wells over him, but he's made himself viable for fantasy. And then yeah, there's 3 plays on each side. Brown for sure. We've talked about him a ton this year. And then at receiver, there's 3 guys. So Charlie Jones, Isaiah Williams, and then TJ Sheffield, somebody I've always been he's really like all over the place. But if O'Connell's having a really good game, I think Sheffield's doing something too.
I could see that for sure. He gets targets for sure. Yeah, I like that. Let's move on to probably the biggest blowout potential of the day is Indiana going to Ohio State. Total here is 58.5 with Ohio State being a 40.5 point favorite. It's 41 in some books right now. It's an interesting spot after last week. I don't really want to judge Ohio State on last week. It was awful weather. But even before that, their passing game, like we know it's there, but it just hasn't been there like it has in the past. I think they're going to try to get it going here. They really need to get things going before the end of the year, before they get into that Michigan game. So I do think this is a spot where they really could try to get Stroud going. Going over to running back, if Henderson is out, I love Mine Williams here. I don't like playing either of them when one of them is in. But if Henderson is out here, I think Williams is a great top play here. Then going over to wide receiver, Harrison's the top guy, kind of separating himself a little bit from Ibuka. Ibuka's a freshman. I think people forget that as freshman, redshirt freshman. But this is his first full season playing out there. And I do think that takes a toll on them later in the year, especially a guy that's, in an offense like this, and he's trying to fill in for JSN, who's been out. He's kind of been fading a little bit, getting a little bit less volume week to week, but he does have that huge upside that we know that he has. Don't love this price for him, but I do think that if JSN is out again, Julian Fleming is the cheap way into this offense. It's kind of every week how it's going to be. Has a very low floor. We know that, but I see this more of a. I don't look at last week. Penn State was a tougher game. I think he still had like 4 or 5 targets, but this is more of an Iowa-Michigan State kind of game where he should get you, 15, 18, 21 points as opposed to the last 2 weeks what we saw. Outside of that, it's kind of where I am. The main 5 that I think every week will be there, depending on who's running back for Ohio State. What are you looking at here?
Yeah, it's interesting because you don't get it. You're not getting a discount after last week or the past few weeks, really, where they've been slow to wake up. My favorite play is Mayan Williams. I think Henderson doesn't go. So I wrote this up on my FanDuel sheet, but they said, so Mayan Williams got like all the carries last week, and we talked briefly about Hayden and then Chip Trinaum.
Yeah.
They might get a few. If it's actually a blowout, they'll get carries too. But Mayan has huge upside here, so he's somebody I like a lot on both sites.
Yeah, I agree. I think a theme of today or tomorrow, we're filming this on Friday, is watching running backs and kind of looking at their spots. There's a lot of running backs that are coming in questionable that are big for their teams that have cupcakes this week. That there's really no reason to play them this week because they have huge games coming up. Zach Charbonnet is in the same situation. So, look at that when you're planning out your teams and trying to plan for the day. So you'll kind of know what to expect coming in. Going over to Notre Dame at Navy. This game is actually at a neutral field. Notre Dame's favored by 15.5 with a 39.5 point total. Not a ton I love here. Navy has their backup quarterback who's not, still kind of learning this triple threat. Drew Pine, the more I see him, the more he's, maybe a MAC level quarterback. He's just not a good quarterback. Audric Estime is getting nice volume. 20 and 18 carries the last 2 weeks. I don't hate him at this price. And then Logan Diggs is also getting nice volume. 28, 20, and 17. He's freshman. They're really getting him more and more involved every week. So I do think both of them are in play. Navy does have, though, a top 10 run defense. They're giving up like 88 yards a game. I think per carry, they're the top run defense in the country. So it is a very good run defense. Then Meyer is finally priced right. I think it's taken all season, and they finally got him where he needed to be last week and this week. And, he's GPP only at this price for me with a total like this. But he's still, he can go off for 25, 35 points any week. But GPP only at this price. Just not an exciting game for me. Anything you think?
Yeah, mostly the running backs to I like Estime and Diggs a lot too, just as part of your rotation of guys.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm thinking. Went over to actually a really fun game here. SMU's traveling to South Florida. SMU's favored by 17.5 with a 72.5 point total. This is the biggest total on this slate. Really like a lot of things here. There's some value, there's some big plays. Mordecai might be my favorite quarterback on this slate. USF is not very good. Has a huge ITT. He's going to throw the ball. The past couple weeks he hasn't thrown it as much in these close games, but he's getting a ton of yards. He is rushing for touchdowns now all of a sudden, which he's never done before, even though he has, he's getting sacked a decent amount too. USF, I don't think is going to put pressure on him. I just think, last week he had 9 passing touchdowns. That game was insane. He's a guy I think is a decent play here. Going over to running back, Batty has been getting decent volume, and SMU doesn't have the best run defense at all. If he's going to get you 19, 20 carries here, I think he is a decent play. And then probably my favorite value on the entire slate is Tyler Levine. It has 42 carries over the last 2 weeks. He's going up against an awful run defense. He is there. Running back 1 with Siggers out, and they forgot he was there, I guess. I have no idea what they're doing. This game has a 72-point total. He's almost a free square for me. You need a ton of value on this slate. He's going to get goal line options. He has 5 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks, so it's not like they're pulling him out on the goal line. So he's just a guy at 3,400 that I think you plug in. Usually you see this with receivers, but I think he's a great play here. Going over to wide receiver, Rashee Rice is another great play. I think he's number 2 in the country in target share or total targets behind Henderson for Iowa State, who we'll talk about in a second. He's expensive, but he's going to get you all of those targets. He has a huge upside, nice floor most weeks. Had a few weeks where he struggled in there, but he's gotten back into form. The other kind of outside of that, it's been very spread out who is getting targets, with Rice getting so many since Jake Bailey and Corrales have been out. Xavier Weaver, though, is somebody you can bring it back with. Dude's getting in a lot of targets. This is not the best pass defense for SMU. He has big playability. He's a red zone guy. He has a nice floor, so you don't have to worry about getting a 2 or getting a 25. So he gets you 13, 15. He doesn't totally take you out of everything at under 6K. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at here. I'm going to have a ton of Levine and a decent amount of this passing offense for SMU and then Weaver. What about you, Aaron? What are you looking at?
Yeah, I agree. Mordecai, you won in your pool with Rice, and then Levine's one of the best plays on the slate. And I agree. Weaver's he has a huge target share, so yeah. If you're stacking, make sure to include him.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting game for sure. Going over to Alabama at Ole Miss. Alabama is an 11.5-point favorite with a 64.5-point total. Interesting plays here. Bryce Young, I hate the price. He just hasn't been doing it this year. He looks like he has a bad receiving core, which he doesn't have a great receiving core. He looks a little bit rattled, kind of throwing off his back leg. Doesn't want to run too much, so not doing what he has in the past. To make it work because there's nothing downfield for it. Still has upside. He threw for 300 yards last week, but just kind of is, not the best play in my opinion. Running backs here are interesting. Gibbs is very expensive, and I like him and I like his upside, but he needs more volume and he's just not getting it. Judkins is getting a ton of volume. They love him there. I think he's a fine play at 7K. Alabama has a really good rush defense, but with this volume, it can be there. The pivot there is Zach Evans. He hasn't been getting a ton of volume, and he's still pretty expensive. But he gets you, 100 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, which he can do. He could break the slate. Going over wide receiver, I don't like wide receivers a ton on either of these teams. The one place I would go is Ja'Cory Brooks. He seems to always be in the middle of things when Alabama's in a close game. And he's gotten a decent floor lately. So, he's kind of a GPP play, but that's about it for me. What are you looking at, man?
Yeah, Judkins definitely a good amount. That's mostly what I'm looking at. I like Ja'Cory Brooks somewhat, but he's not a priority.
One thing I want to talk about, just to throw out there, we're not talking about the afternoon slate, but this DraftKings afternoon slate is ugly for quarterbacks. I think you kind of do have to take a stand on some of these guys, like Bryce Young gets thrown in there. And you'll see as we go on, it's just you got to figure out what's safe. I'm just going to jump in and then play around that. All right, going over to Iowa State at Oklahoma State. Iowa State's favored here by 1.5 with a 48.5 point total. Sanders is questionable. No one really knows what he's going to do. I don't think he's going to go here, just the way the line is. But we got to keep an eye on that. If he does go, he is the next play. My favorite value quarterback on this slate is Hunter Decker. Oklahoma State has an awful run pass defense, just defense right now. They've given up at least 23 DraftKings points to every Big 12 quarterback they face. They've given up 31 DraftKings points against 4 of the 6 teams they've played. I know Deckers doesn't have the highest ceiling every week, but I think this is a spot for a ceiling game for him, even with a lower total. I think he is in a great spot here, and you need value at places. If Sanders is out, I'm off of this running game completely for because it just load the box because their backups are awful. One guy that's another nice value running back is Cantavius Norton, getting more and more volume every week. And again, this is a bad defense. So I do think he is in play. Not as much as Levine, just not getting the volume and not as much as surety, but it is a nice play. And then at wide receiver, there's several options I like here. Hutchinson's always in play, and even more here with a bad pass defense. Bryson Green is my favorite Oklahoma State play, one of my favorite receiver plays. Even with the backups in, he's getting a ton of volume. Had 11 targets last week, and they're just going to try to get the ball to him regardless. And then I think Brennan Presley, he's a GPP play if you want to go there. But Green is the guy that I really want to target for Oklahoma State. Where are you, Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. I like the Norton call at running back. Green is, by far the best Oklahoma State play at receiver. And then I agree on Deckers. He's a strong play in the main and afternoon slates. And then at receiver, Green, Hutchinson. I still like Noel. Didn't do well last week, but I still like him. Yeah, mostly those plays.
Yeah, I agree. I think my favorite quarterback is Deckers. For what that says about this quarterback thing. Going over to Louisville's going to Clemson. Clemson's favored by 7 with a 52-point total. Cunningham here, this is a tough spot for him. Clemson does very well against the rush. They do pretty well against running quarterbacks. So, I can't go there at this price. I don't even know how much TJU is going to play or if Klubnik is coming in, so I'm not going either of those. Going to running back, I love Will Shipley here. Decent price for what else is out there. He didn't get a ton of work last week. It was a bad game script. I think it's a much better game script this week. Gets back to his 20 to 25 carries that he gets in closer games. I do think this will be somewhat close for a while. But I do think he has a nice upside here. Other than that, that's about it. I don't really like playing wide receivers from either of these teams. What are you looking at here?
Yeah, mostly just Shipley for me.
Yeah, I get that for sure. Going over to Nebraska and Michigan. Big Ten game here. Michigan's favored by 30.5 with a 48.5 point total. J.J. McCarthy's interesting to me a little bit, more on the afternoon slate, but just because the quarterbacks are so bad and Nebraska is awful. Nebraska defense is just not good. Blake Corum, he's 8,300. I'm almost to the point to just plug him in, and you lock him in with Levine, you average out their prices, and combine their 11.7, so you're getting both of them under 6K each for probably the two top running backs on the slate. My biggest concern would be volume in a blowout, but in a blowout last week he had 20 carries. I think he is going to, I think this is a game he could get 200 yards. On that same line, Donovan Edwards is getting more carries in blowouts, has at least 10 in each of the last 3 weeks, and has 16 and 15 in that Penn State and that Rutgers game. So this is a spot I think he's going to get a ton of work too. So I think he's a good GPP play here. If for some reason, Thompson, he's out, so that kind of takes Palmer out for me. The only other kind of wide receiver punt, probably my wide receiver punt of the slate, because there's not a ton of wide receiver value on this slate, would be Schoonmaker. He's very much a boomer bust play, but he gets some volume at times. He missed the Penn State game, but against Iowa had nice volume. Has I think he's second on the team in targets. Had a decent game last week, and he's under 4K. So yeah, my top plays here, Corum for sure, and then Edwards is a decent GPP play, and Schoonmaker as a punt if you want to go there. What are you looking at, Aaron?
Yeah, mostly just Edwards and Corum for me. Yeah, Corum is definitely somebody you want in all formats.
Yeah,
and then I agree on Schoonmaker too. He's a good dart play.
Yeah, there's not a ton of wide receivers under 5K on the slate, so you got to kind of make your own value. Going over to Maryland at Penn State. Penn State is favored by 10.5 with a 57-point total. I don't love Clifford's price here, but Maryland has given up good games, 2 quarterbacks each of the last 3 games. So it is a place where I might have some GPP action on him just to get different and try to get somebody at a lower ownership, more of a pivot play for me. Man, I tell you, every year, bad teams, he's good. Good teams, he's bad. It's just same thing every year. So can't really go there here. Going over to running back, some interesting options, I think. Singleton and Allen are both getting very similar volumes every week, but Allen has, I believe, 4 touchdowns the last 2 weeks to 1 for Singleton. He got kind of the goal line work last week. They're both getting involved in the passing game a little bit, but Allen more. So he's kind of, I don't hate him for cash here against the Maryland team that struggles against the run. Singleton's still getting very similar volume, just not getting the touchdowns and not getting as much work in the passing game. So he's kind of my GPP pivot. I would not necessarily play them together. I don't hate it in some GPP lineups if you're playing like 150 lineups, but if you're playing like 20 or less, I would not play them together. And then Washington had volume a couple weeks ago, wasn't really needed last week in a blowout. If this game stays close, I do think he could get some volume, but I don't love his price. There's other places I'd rather go there. That's kind of where I'm at. I don't really love anything on Maryland here. What are you looking at, Aaron?
Yeah, it's a tough game. Maybe somebody like Theo Johnson in the cheap. Yeah, there's really you're really kind of getting at the 3,500. You're really kind of dipping down. He's had some good games lately. And then I could see the backs more for the afternoon slate.
Yeah.
But I'm fine with Allen and Singleton in the afternoon slate. And
more for sure.
I don't hate Hemby, but I'm also not super excited either with some of the other options we have.
Yeah, I don't hate him. He just, he has a ceiling, but all of his games, he had some really big games. but they were against SMU, Buffalo,
Northwestern.
Purdue, Northwestern, Indiana. He didn't do it against anybody good, and that's what a lot of these big teams tend to do. They put up a ton of points against bad teams, and then they crumble against good teams. All right, last game on this slate. UCF is going to Tulane, one of the biggest games of the week, I think. Tulane favored by 1.5 with a 54.5 point total. I like Michael Pratt here. I think he is a nice play again here. Kind of struggled last week, has the past couple weeks, but he has upside. And I do think this is a big game for them. Obviously, it's a big game for them. I'm off of the UCF quarterbacks, even if Plumlee is back. I've heard there's been rumors that they could play both of them because Mikey Keene has looked good. And there's rumor, there's just so much out there. I don't hate Keene. I don't hate Keene in a vacuum if Plumlee is out. I hate this price. It's awful. There's no reason he should be 7,600. So, off of that situation, going over to running back, Spears is always in play. He's involved all over this offense. This is a very good front seven, though, for UCF. They do have a good defense. I would go Harvey over Bowser right now. Harvey's just the better back lately, but both of them are going to get carries. 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. He's getting work in the passing game, had 2 big games. 35 carries in the past 2 weeks. Go over and look at Bowser. He's sitting at 29, so a little bit less. It's kind of like a 1A, 1B situation. But Harvey, you're getting a discount as well. So I really like that there. Then going over to wide receiver, I don't hate O'Keefe here. I do think he is in play. He has bigger upside, but I said it last week. I'll say it again this week. I like this passing game a lot more when Mikey Keene is playing. When Plumlee comes in, it's a much more run-based offense. And RPOs with more running and emphasis on the R than the PO. Also this is Tulane has a very good secondary, one of the best secondaries in probably the country, not just the Group of 5. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. If you want to look for some options on the afternoon slate, Hudson's in play, I guess. He's a more consistent, mid-priced guy, but he's too expensive. And Baker, I guess, if you want to go there. But yeah, O'Keefe is kind of the play for me there. And Pratt, I like as a value guy. And Harvey, I love here. I think he's a really nice play. What are you looking at, Aaron?
Yeah, I like this game a lot. Just in general, I think UCF has a good chance to win. And I think Keene's definitely an upgrade right now over JRP. So he's actually really cheap on FanDuel. He's $7K. So I think he's worth playing, especially if we get some more definite news. Running back, I agree on Harvey, more for the afternoon slate. I think he's a strong play, and Spears has been good too. And that receiver, I agree on O'Keefe. He's a strong play here.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic for the past few weeks. We've had really strong afternoon slates on this main Draftkings slate now. It's a much stronger morning slate than it is. That afternoon slate's just ugly. But yeah, tell me a little bit about the FanDuel slate. What are you looking at for those night games? That night slate is pretty.
Yeah, so as many of those know who've been playing for some time, the FanDuel main slate includes some night games. So North Carolina, Wake Forest should be very up and down because North Carolina can't play defense. So Drake May is going to be pretty popular. The top 2 popular quarterbacks are going to be Bo Nix and Drake May, who are like 1 and 2 in college football fantasy this year in terms of raw points. I love Mine Williams on both sites. He's 8,500, which is a great play. And then trying to find Harp. Yeah, all the UCF guys are really cheap on FanDuel for some reason. Harvey's pretty cheap. So even if you don't get the quarterback news, I'll probably have a good amount of Harvey in there. And then someone like Dejon Edwards, I've been playing a lot. He only had 3.5 points last week, but now it's kind of the familiar, even though the Tennessee game got a little out of hand, this is a better game environment for him. So there's some nice cheap running back plays. And then at receiver, we have the usual studs like Down and Green for UNC. I like A.T. Perry. He's kind of a mid-range 8,400. That's where Worthy is also. And then, yeah, the Washington receivers are pretty nice too. You can run back like Washington and Oregon receivers with Bo Nix, and yeah, there's gonna be a lot of waiting around on FanDuel because of the magnitude of the evening slate games.
Yeah,
So
for sure. I'm excited about
have
that.
some patience because it's gonna be a long day on the FanDuel main slate for sure.
Yeah, it's exciting. It'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, make sure you come on over to DFS Army, join us. Everything, MLB just phased out, but we're doing great and right in the middle of NFL season. NBA is getting going into the meat of their season. NHL is doing great. And we're finishing up college football strong. I'm excited for these last 3 weeks. Excited, tons of news. We're always breaking it. Our domination station optimizer is really, really getting going, really making some people some money and doing really well. So, yeah, head on over today. There'll be a link in the bottom to join, and we look forward to seeing you. Good luck this weekend, and we'll see you next week.